Good morning, St. Philip's family, and happy Thursday of Easter week to all of you. We are continuing in our series of daily devotions, and as you might remember from last week, I have the privilege of sharing with you some of the great hymns of the church. And the Easter season is a time that is particularly rich with ancient hymns, and that is because, of course, Easter is the signal feast of the Christian year, and in the ancient church was the time when people rejoiced exceedingly after a long observation of Lent that was perhaps more serious than the way that we observe Lent today. But Easter, of course, is the great celebration of the miracle of Jesus' resurrection from the dead and all that that means to us. And the hymn that I would like to share with you today is one that is called "Come Ye Faithful, Raise the Strain." And it is a glorious hymn that dates way back to the 700s. It was written by St. John of Damascus, who was a brilliant young man, schooled in theology and philosophy and music and literature and all sorts of things, who was, not surprisingly, from the way we call him St. John of Damascus, actually from Damascus in Syria, that great city which is where St. Paul was knocked off of his horse, blinded by the light of Jesus Christ coming to him. So it is a particularly appropriate place to think about someone growing up and celebrating the great wonder and miracle of Easter. St. John of Damascus was one of the great church fathers, one of the latest of those, and he eventually ended up becoming a monk and moving to Jerusalem. But I wanted to share with you the text of this great Easter hymn, and I'll put a link to a recording with a slightly different tune than you might be used to, but one which I think will encourage you to consider with great wonder the words of this hymn. So, of course, it begins, "Come ye faithful, raise the strain of triumphant gladness. God has brought his Israel into joy from sadness, loosed from Pharaoh's bitter yoke, Jacob's sons and daughters, led them with unmoistened foot through the Red Sea waters." I love this emphasis on comparing our journey in Easter to the journey of the children of Israel out of slavery in Egypt, because we are taken from the slavery of sin and by the blood and death and resurrection of Jesus Christ brought over to the promised land, the land of joy, the land where God reigns eternally. Second verse, "'Tis the spring of souls today, Christ hath burst his prison, and from 3 days' sleep and death, as a sun has risen. All the winter of our sins, long and dark is flying, from his light to whom we give laud and praise undying." It is as if we have been released from prison because of what Jesus has done. And I love the part, "all the winter of our sins, long and dark is flying, from his light." Jesus' light of the resurrection is so bright that it chases away the darkness, the winter of our sins, which of course reminds me of the winter of Narnia being chased away by Aslan's sacrifice in that great story by C.S. Lewis. And the third verse, so appropriate for us today in the beauty of springtime in Charleston. "Now the queen of seasons bright, with the day of splendor, with the royal feast of feast, comes its joy to render, comes to glad Jerusalem, who with true affection welcomes with unwearied strains Jesus' resurrection." Easter is indeed the queen of seasons, and new life is bursting out all around us, the whole creation testifying to the glory of God and the wonder of his life-giving power that is revealed in Jesus Christ. And then my favorite verse, "Neither might the gates of death, nor the tomb's dark portal, nor the watchers, nor the seal hold thee as a mortal. But today amidst thine own thou didst stand bestowing that thy peace which evermore passes human knowing. And this verse reminds me a lot of what Jeff was talking about in his Easter sermon, of all of the ways that because of fear that Jesus might rise or that his disciples would steal the body, the tomb had been sealed with a Roman seal, and Roman soldiers who, to break that seal or to leave their post, would have been a strenuous and harsh penalty, even death. And yet none of those things could contain Jesus. The gates of death could not contain him. Nothing could hold him as a mortal. But he was brought again to life by God's resurrection power and came back to his beloved disciples to wish them his peace, that peace that passes human understanding. So today, as you go about your new routine in this time of quarantine and COVID-19, do not let your heart be sad, but let it be filled with the joy of Jesus' resurrection, that truth that nothing could hold Jesus in the tomb, and that God's power has brought him back to life, and with him has brought us out of the winter of our sins into the springtime of his love. This hymn, sung for over 1,200 years by generations and generations of Christians, should encourage us to live in that resurrection light. May God bless you as you ponder these great truths.